I'm back with Charlene.
Hello.
Miss Shaw. As you can see, we are in the same clothes as the last video, so we did the same video on the same day.
You guys have been asking for an update on the Mrs Birling video. So what we're going to do is give you some more quotes that you could possibly use in an essay, and also some analysis around those quotes, including some AO3 links as well. And we will try as much as possible to link the quotes to theme as well, so that even if you don't get a Mrs Birling question, you might still be able to use some of these quotes for theme as well.
Grand.
Aren't you lucky?
I know. So let's get started. So we're going to start off with the first quotation right at the beginning of the play, which describes Mrs Birling in the stage directions. Priestley says she's a rather cold woman and her husband's social superior. So starting off with this description of her, I think is quite significant because it allows us to see what she will be like throughout the whole play.
It just foreshadows everything to come in terms of her character and how she reacts to the events of the play, I think.
Definitely. So we're going to start off. So when you analyse at word level, the best thing I'd say to do is follow the particular steps. Try to think about what word class it is. So is it a verb, adjective, noun, etc. Then start looking at the denotation of a word. What is the meaning of a word? A word can have multiple meanings, and sometimes that can help aid your connotations, which is the next step that you should look at. Sometimes we're like, yeah, I know what that word means, but actually there are different meanings to it, which can then relate to other things.
Yeah, you've got to know what context it's meant in, so that you don't go off on a massive tangent in the middle of your essay.
Yeah. And then you can start looking at the effect of the particular words or phrases that have been used by the writer. And then you can then make the links to the context and think about their word choices a bit more and what influence do they want to have on the reader. And so here, Priestley's trying to have an influence on how we see Mrs Birling from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And so by using the adjective cold, he's showing it means to lack affection or warmth of feeling or being unemotional, which is pretty much what we see of her character in the play.
Yeah, and it also kind of links to his description of the setting. It's not cosy and home-like, and she's a rather cold woman, so it kind of suggests her social status. She probably didn't have a lot to do with the decoration of the house and bringing things in, because that was considered beneath her. The servants would have done it for her, so she didn't really, or wouldn't have played much of a role in making it cosy and home-like, which again reflects her character.
Yeah, and she's not just cold in her way with either. She's cold to the inspector, she was cold to her family. And so I think, and you say, so within her home, it's a cold home, and in the way they are with each other and the environment that they're in.
I always think, like, who hurt you?
Who hurt you, Mrs Birling?
I feel like it's one of those Notebook type things where she obviously wanted to marry someone that she wasn't allowed to, so she married Mr Birling instead,
and that is something to look at. She's bitter.
Who's hurt you? Girl, come for a chat.
And that links actually, because by Priestley saying that she's her husband's social superior, he is wanting us to highlight this idea of the class. Because realistically, at the time, in Edwardian Britain, you didn't really marry outside of your class. And so to have Mrs Birling being her husband's social superior, you wouldn't expect it. So why did she marry him? And I think that is definitely sort of kind of alternative interpretations of it.
Why?
You know, is it for love or was it for money? And I made a video previously about, you know, did Gerald want to marry Sheila because he loved her? Or again, is it showing I think there's a change in time. Within, you know, Industrial Revolution, there were a lot of people who were becoming part of the you know, middle upper class because of making money through that. And so I think a lot of the upper class realised that their prestige and their reputation or their name, say, didn't help them in regards to the rise of, I think they call them the nouveau riche, this class, the new middle class that came forward,
and the kind of power that comes with that, the power of new money.
So again, was she cold in regards to even her view on love and marrying Mr Birling for status and money rather than actual, You know, because why would she marry beneath her? Because the kind of character she is as well.
Yeah.
She doesn't seem very loving to, you know, suggest that she married him for love.
Yeah.
So that's something to think about.
Yeah, so theme-wise, you've got social class, obviously. Could also link it to gender as well. Even though she's her husband's social superior, she's still inferior because she's a woman. So you could kind of use that for a gender-based question as well. Even though she has some power, does she ultimately have a lot? And the little power that she has, does she use it in the right way?
Exactly.
Obviously not, because she doesn't help either.
She uses it to still uphold the patriarchy, which then goes nicely on to our next quote we picked, which was this idea. She says, "Be quiet so that your father can decide what we ought to do." And then in stage direction it says, "Looks expectantly at Birling." So I think that does lead this idea of her upholding the patriarchy. She's very much telling Sheila here to be quiet and listen to what the man has to say. You know, she's giving this order to Sheila to be quiet. And, you know, throughout the play, we see Sheila become her own person. And it seems here like Mrs Birling is trying to silence the younger generation and quieten her as a female as well. And so she is showing the traditional roles of women in just being meek and submissive to a man.
Yeah, it's almost like she kind of is nasty to women because they're lower than men, and she's nasty to like the inspector because he's of a lower social standing. But when it comes to her husband, even though typically the audience don't agree with what he's doing, to a certain extent she probably doesn't agree with what he's done, she still looks expectantly at him and kind of, as you say, upholds that kind of gender stereotype as well. And
when she says, "For your father can decide what we ought to do," you know, he has to make the choice. He is the head of the household. You would have typical roles then. You have he'd be the breadwinner. She should be the homemaker in a sense, but she can't have Edna to do that. So, you know, and so she is looking to him to decide, to make the choice, even if you say it's not the choice that she wants.
Right choice, yeah.
And ought to indicates duty or obligation. That is, and that's quite pressure on a man as well to feel like, you know, it indicates his duty and his obligation to make that decision.
For the good of the family.
For the good of the family.
Maybe
but in their sense, for the good of themselves.
Yeah.
So, the stage directions with her looking expectantly at Birling, even seeing that on stage would be quite interesting, because the audience would see her turning to looking at him expectantly.
Yeah.
And I suppose how the director would choose to stage that, is Birling going to be on the same level, she can be lower? Do you see what I mean? So I think there's a lot of ways you go with that in order to show the idea of status, male status, class status within this quote.
Yeah, definitely.
Because directing one's gaze. So she's modelling the behaviour here of how she wants Sheila to act. So be quiet, Sheila, and look at, look to the man.
Look at the father.
Yeah, so she's modelling that behaviour.
Yeah.
That she expects. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a good quote. You can use that for a lot. You can use it obviously if you've got Mrs Birling.
Yeah.
You can use it for exploring the older versus the younger generations, class, gender. That's a good all-rounder. Guys, remember this quote, please.
So our final quote we're going to look at is...
"It was simply a piece of gross impertinence, quite deliberate, and naturally that was one of the things that prejudiced me against her case."
So, this is towards when the inspector is interrogating her and her reasons for why she refused to give her money from the charity to help her in her situation, which was her being pregnant and alone. So I think looking at the gross impertinence to begin with, gross means to, especially of wrongdoing, very obvious and unacceptable. So she's suggesting that Eva's behaviour by using her name, Mrs Birling, was showing lack of respect and rudeness towards her. But actually, she's being a bit hypocritical, because it's her that's in fact showing lack of respect for the inspector, who technically is a member of authority, because she's not aware that he's not an inspector. So it's interesting how she believes that she can say what she wants or do certain things, and it's not wrong, but someone like Eva can't do something like that.
Yeah. I really like Priestley's word choice with simply and naturally, like both adverbs that are quite delicate and feminine, but she's talking about gross impertinence and prejudice, me against the case. So it's kind of almost like she's choosing, or Priestley's choosing nice, feminine, nice words to kind of soften the blow of the fact that it's a gross impertinence almost.
Yeah.
So he's trying to kind of not lighten the mood, but show that she is a woman and women are quite delicate. So she's trying to kind of brush it over the fact that actually she's the one conducting gross impertinence. She's the one that was nasty and rude to Sheila, Sheila and Eva.
But that's what I think a lot of the upper class were associated with, in this idea of, what's the word I'm thinking of? The facade of respectability.
Yeah.
And this idea of we don't do such things, but actually they do, and they're able to use their language in order to hide or to cover up certain things. And I suppose the working class are not educated enough to have that sort of
that
language to use. Also, the idea of saying naturally, it's one thing that pushes me against her case. Naturally means as a logical result or by nature, and actually this can then link to kind of the capitalist class feeling that they naturally have power because they are the rich. And I think to some people from her class maybe would not see her actions as being wrong. Yeah. Because actually, Eva should have known her natural place, in the natural order of her status and how people view her in society. So yeah.
You've also got when you're looking at the quote visually, the dashes. So gross impertinence, dash, quite deliberate dash. So Priestley there is really emphasising and separating quite deliberately the difference in class between Mrs Birling and Eva Smith as well.
Yeah. And by her just saying as well that it's the thing that prejudiced me against her case, Priestley's using the word prejudice to show that Mrs Birling is being prejudiced. You see what I mean? And because of Eva's class. So he's kind of using the words to expose her own prejudice in the sense. And I think as well, because Eva is part of the undeserving class, she should have known her place. And I think that's what has made Mrs Birling so angry, is because how dare she use her name? How dare she not be kind of this kind of begging woman who, wanted her charity? I think, and linked to AO3, a lot of kind of middle upper class women would form charities, again, as a facade of respectability, to show that, they're being helpful and good and kind, when actually it's all more for show.
Yeah. It all links back to that first quote as well. She's rather cold.
Yeah, exactly.
This quote screams good that she's rather cold.
Yeah, and you could actually, if you did use those quotes, that would be a good time to then link that back to this beginning. So you're showing, that you can take quotations from different parts of the text and make them all link together within your argument. But yeah, we're currently watching The Good Place at the moment.
As a side note, watching The Good Place.
We've been watching it like 3 seasons in
2 days.
2 days, wow. And it's this idea of doing good. Is it altruistic, the reasons why you do good? Or is it for show and to think that by doing these things you're going to be rewarded in that sense? And so I do think having charities like this, it wasn't for altruistic reasons why they would help.
It was just to show
exactly
that they were good people.
And so I think Priestley's using this example of Mrs Birling to highlight this idea, and it shows how easy it is for someone like her to make or break someone, because this was the kind of final straw that then led to Eva taking her life. And I think
Mrs Birling's not going to The Good Place.
No, definitely not in the medium place. It's she's definitely an interesting character to look at. So in regards to like the 7 deadly sins, for example, because that is something that Priestley seems to look at.
Yeah.
She would, I suppose, be pride.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because her pride doesn't allow her to see her wrongful actions.
Yeah.
I think. So yeah, I think she's pride personified in that sense. So yeah. So in regards to writing an essay like this, start with a mini introduction. Think about, if it was a Mrs Birling question or a theme question, make sure you have a brief intro that relates to the question and shows your understanding of the question and whether it's the character or the theme.
Yeah.
And what kind of direction you think that your argument is going in. What are you trying to show in your essay about Mrs Birling? Then you could use these quotations and have a paragraph each on this, and preferably in that order. If start off from the beginning and towards the end. I think it's better than starting at the end of the play and then coming back to the beginning.
Yeah, always try and follow the chronological order of the text.
Yeah,
I would say.
especially because it is a play that is like that.
Yeah.
And then ending with your conclusion, thinking about, this is where you give your personal response in it, thinking about how Priestley, what his main intentions in that sense, and you can then make that link about how relevant is it today. Do we still see these ideas of these people like Mrs Birling in our society today? Have we as a society or as a learned anything from it? I think this is where you can get your personal response in.
Yeah. I feel like we have.
I think we do.
Yeah, it's
just in the
different.
social media world now. That's all it is. You probably just have it on a wider scale, but it's it can be exposed very quickly, but at the same time it can also be masked as well.
Yeah.
This behaviour. So don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, see you later.
Bye.
Bye. Woo. Okay, I can have a nap now.